Okay, so today we're going to talk about frequency tables. Before we do that, let's get down a couple definitions. First, that being, what is data? Data is just information that we collect. There are two types of data. We have quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative is numbers. Qualitative is like a category. So think about like bar graphs. Bar graphs are used a lot of times for qualitative data because you can take a measure of how many people like pizza, how many people like hot dogs, how many people like different types of food. That is qualitative. How many people are 45 years old? That is also qualitative, even though it's a number. Mean, median, and mode are quantitative ways of getting data. Frequency is the number of times the data occurs. So let's look at an example. There are 90 students who were surveyed and asked how they got to school. The results are as follows. 31 rode the bus, 21 walked, 4 rode a bike, 19 drove themselves, and 15 rode in a car. These are all qualitative informations with quantities attached to them. We can create a frequency table of this information. The frequency of how each one occurred goes here, which just directly copied from our list. And cumulative frequency means we add as we go, meaning the rows add up to be this number. So this first row is 31. This 52 is coming from 31 plus 21. 56 is coming from the 52 plus the 4, or all three of these. 75 comes from all 4, and 90 comes from all of them added up, which should be our total of students that we surveyed. In this case, it is, so we're good. So this is how you create a cumulative frequency chart. That's one type of frequency table. The results of the students' music preference are organized in a frequency table below, and we're going to use it to answer some questions. What is the relative frequency of certain students? Well, first off, there are 39 total students when we add them up. How many like rock music? Well, that would be 10 out of the 39. Hip-hop is 7 out of the 39. Classical, 5 out of 39. Country, 7 out of 39. And then the probability of picking a student that prefers listening to alternative music is 6 out of 39. If you notice, these relative frequencies are set up the same way that probability is set up. That is not a coincidence. Relative frequency and probability mean the same thing. Next, let's talk about flipping a coin. So a student conducts an experiment by tossing 3 coins one after each other. Using the results, what is the probability that exactly 2 heads will occur on the next 3 turns? Well, if you notice, you have a table there with how many flips each combination was. So here is our coin toss and the frequency. This table means 5 times 3 heads appeared, 7 times it was heads, heads, tails, 9 times it was heads, tails, tails, and so on. Remember, our question asked, what is the probability that exactly 2 heads will occur? That's this scenario, and this scenario. So if I add 7, 6, and 2, I get 15 out of the total, which is 50. So this should be 15 out of 50, which reduces to 3 out of 10. Or 30% if you're that, if you want to write it as a percent and decimal. Next, a student conducts a probability experiment by spinning a spinner. Using the results of the frequency table, what's the probability that the spinner will point at 4 on the next spin? So here's our results. 29 times 1 occurred, 32 times 2 occurred, and so on. There's 100 total frequencies, so that's our bottom. And 4 occurred 18 times. So 18 out of 100 is 9 out of 50, or about 18%. A two-way frequency table divides the survey responses by characteristics of 2 respondents. So we can talk about boys and girls, you can talk about cats and dogs, you can talk about 2 different types of things. The two-way frequency table can be helpful in finding joint probability and conditional probability. Joint probability is when you use the word and. So the probability that the student is a female and wearing a green shirt. Conditional probability means something has already occurred to reduce your sample population. So it's what's the probability that a female is wearing green. You already know the person's a female and you're looking at only the female population for wearing that green shirt. Today we're going to do joint. On Monday you're going to learn about conditional probability. So joint probability is the probability that event A and B are occurring. It's written A and B, or remember our intersection symbol for from before with the unit and the intersection. So an example could be something like this. 70 students were asked, here's our table down here. 70 students total were asked which class was their favorite, math or social studies. And they were divided into boys and girls. So this is a two-way frequency table because I have two things here and I have two things there. There's your two-way. What's the probability that a student chosen at random is a boy and likes math? So because of this word and, that's joint. We want to know that they're boy and they like math. So looking at this table, this section right here is the number of boys that like math. They like both. And so that would be 14 out of the total 70, which reduces to 1/5. Is a student who likes social studies. So that doesn't specify if it's a girl or a boy. It's just all the people that like social studies. So that would be this group and this group, or 35 total out of 70, which is a half. What's the probability that they are a girl? That would be these two sections here that are girls. So that's 33 out of 70, which does not reduce. Is a girl and likes math. So girl and likes the math is the 21 out of the 70, because we're still talking about randomly choosing a student, which reduces to 3 out of 10. If you have any questions, now's the time to ask Miss Lewis. Next, we're going to look at a frequency table that has everything kind of in percent form. We're going to look at a couple questions and I'm going to let you finish the page. First off, it says a college surveyed 3,500 of its students to determine what type of music they preferred over movies or sports. So did you like music, movies, or sports? This number up here is your total amount of people. If you notice, all down here through the frequency table, it's decimals. These are all percents. 3,500 is your total amount of students. So keep that in mind. Always highlight somewhere in the word it's going to have this number. Then it asks you some questions. It says, what percent of students preferred music? Well, music is this column here. So all I did was add them up and I got 33%. Sports, add up all the sports and you get 30%. Movies, add up all the movies and you get 37%. What percent of students were freshmen? Well, this row is my freshman row. So when I add all of those up, I get 25%. Same thing with sophomores and juniors and seniors. You just add up their rows. And if you notice, it's kind of evenly distributed, but kind of heavy on the seniors. So if you're asked if this survey was fair, you could kind of go either way. Yes, there's a pretty good even keel of freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, but because there's this extra 3% of seniors, it might skew your data just a little bit. Question 3 says how many freshmen were surveyed. Anytime it says how many, that means you have to have a whole number. You can't have a decimal or percent of a person. So what we do is we take our freshman percent and multiply it by our total. So this number came from 0.25 times 3,500, which gives us 875. The same technique is used to find out how many sophomores, juniors, and seniors there are. It says how many students are freshmen and preferred music. So that's your joint, using the word and. So we want freshmen and preferred music. So that's 6% of our 3,500. So to find this answer, we did 0.06 times our 3,500, which equals 210. Then it asks what percent of freshmen preferred music. That's our 6%. Okay, now I want you to pause the video for a few minutes and see if you can answer questions 6 through 10 before checking them. Alright, number 6 says how many students are sophomores that and prefer movies. Sophomores and movies is 5% out of the 3,500, so that's 175 students. How many students are juniors and preferred sports? That would be 8% out of our 3,500. How many students are seniors and preferred movies or sports over music? So that one's a little tricky. We're looking at seniors. So this row that preferred movies or sports, so 10 and 9, so 19% over music. So 19 minus the 8 is 11, so 11% more, times our 3,500 gave us the 665. What percent of juniors and freshmen prefer movies and music? Well, that would be our freshmen that preferred movies and music, so that's 16%, and our juniors that preferred music and movies, so that's also 16%. 16 and 16 is 32%. And then what percent of 10th graders preferred movies? 10th grade means sophomores. Movies is 5%. So 5% of the 3,500 is 175. Questions 6 and 10 ask the exact same thing, just in 2 different ways. If you have any questions about frequency tables or how to figure out how many or what percent, now's the time to ask Miss Lewis. Tomorrow, you will have a quiz on Venn diagrams and basic probability and these frequency tables. You will review for a little bit and then you will take the quiz. So make sure all questions are answered today before you leave. If you have no questions, then you need to begin working on the homework that goes along with this section.